She is one of the most overlooked figures in Scripture, a woman whose name has been buried by time, though her courage held the last threads of humanity together during the darkest moment in history. While the world outside drowned in its own corruption, she stood inside the ark, carrying a weight that few have ever imagined. The flood was not only a judgment upon the earth, it was a test of endurance, faith, and silent strength. And no one embodied that strength more than the wife of Noah, the woman who stood in the shadows while the world collapsed. Long before the first raindrop fell, she witnessed the world decay around her. The violence, the arrogance, the cruelty, she saw it all. Humanity had abandoned every spark of goodness. What people celebrated as freedom was nothing more than rebellion against the God who had formed them. Noah walked with God, but she lived in a world that rejected him. Neighbors mocked her family, laughed at her husband's obedience, and treated them as lunatics. Every day she watched Noah build the ark under the scorching sun, and every day she endured insults simply because she chose to stand at his side. Yet she did not break. While Noah hammered wood and sealed planks with pitch, she worked alongside him in unseen ways. She prepared supplies, preserved food, wove coverings, and arranged storage for what would later sustain life. She cared for their sons and taught them to follow the path of righteousness in a world where righteousness was despised. Her faith was not loud or dramatic. It was steady, consistent, the kind that anchors a home in the middle of a storm. When the command finally came for them to enter the ark, she carried the weight of leaving behind everything she had ever known. Her home, her memories, her extended family, every familiar sound of life outside, all would be swallowed by judgment. She entered the ark knowing she would hear screams on the other side of its walls. She entered knowing the world she walked out of would never exist again. She entered carrying not fear but obedience. As the animals came in pairs, she helped settle them. She calmed the uneasy, organized the space, and kept the ark from descending into chaos. The interior of that vessel was not a peaceful sanctuary. It was a living world of noise, movement, and uncertainty. She lived for months in darkness lit only by lamps, surrounded by restless creatures and the unending groaning of the storm outside. Yet she remained composed, turning disorder into a place where life could survive. When the rain began, she felt the tremors of the earth loosen beneath them. The sound of the waters striking the hull was not gentle. It was violent, a relentless pounding that shook every beam and board. She heard the cries outside, fading into the roar of the rising floods. She held her family together during those dreadful moments, reminding them silently that obedience had saved them. She did not crumble under the sound of a dying world. She stood firm. Inside the ark, she became the unseen pillar of stability. Noah led the mission, but she held together the daily life that made the mission possible. She rationed food, tended to the animals, soothed fears, repaired what broke, and brought order where there would otherwise be confusion. Each day was a test of endurance. Creatures crying out, suns wrestling with uncertainty, the smell of confinement, the endless rocking as the waters surged beneath them. But she endured every moment without complaint. The floodwaters covered mountains, erased valleys, and swallowed cities. Time inside the ark felt different. Days blurred into weeks and weeks blurred into months. She counted time not by the storm outside, but by the rhythm of responsibility inside. She did not ask when it would end, she simply did what needed to be done. Her resilience was not recorded in Scripture, but it was carved into the survival of every living being that stepped off the ark when the waters receded. When the ark finally rested on the mountains of Ararat, a new chapter began, but it was not yet time to leave. Weeks passed. The world outside was silent, emptied of all life except what remained within the wooden vessel she had helped sustain. She waited patiently through the testing of the raven and the dove, understanding that God, not time, determined their departure. Her trust did not waver. When the dove finally returned with an olive leaf, she felt the first breath of hope in months, yet she did not rush. She had learned that survival depended on waiting for God's timing. When the doors of the ark creaked open at last, she stepped out into a world washed clean, a world reborn. The air smelled different, the sky felt wider, the ground beneath her feet was unfamiliar. She was no longer surrounded by corruption but by silence, potential, and the responsibility to begin again. She had not only survived the flood, she had carried the weight of rebuilding the world. Every generation that followed, every family, every nation, every life that breathes today is connected to her endurance. Without her strength, the ark would have been a shell. Without her presence, Noah's mission would have collapsed from within. She was the heartbeat of a world in rebirth. Her story teaches that courage does not always shout. Sometimes courage is quiet, consistent, unseen. It is the strength to hold a family together when everything outside collapses. It is the ability to endure storms without demanding recognition. It is the faith to trust God in the middle of uncertainty, darkness, and loss. She was not named, but her legacy is felt in every life that exists today. She represents every woman whose strength shapes the survival of those around her. Every woman who stands firm when the world mocks. Every woman who works in silence but holds the weight of extraordinary responsibility. Every woman whose endurance becomes the foundation for future generations. She walked into the ark carrying the remnants of a dying world, and she stepped out carrying the future of the living. Her story is not one of fame but of endurance. Not of recognition but of stability. Not of triumph shouted on mountaintops, but of quiet faith lived inside a wooden ark while the sky poured judgment on the earth. She stands as a reminder that God's greatest works are often supported by those who remain unseen, those whose strength is steady, those who remain faithful not for applause but out of devotion. Noah built the ark, but she held its heart together. Through her resolve, humanity received a second chance.